There are villages across Britain where time seems frozen, where cosy cottages and quiet lanes hide secrets that locals refuse to talk about. But beneath the surface of postcard beauty, something is wrong, very wrong. These are 3 true stories from British villages that may make you question whether evil prefers the quietest places of all. I was never the type to believe in ghost stories, not really. Not until the summer of 2019, when I agreed to house sit for my cousin in a small village somewhere in Kent. I won't name the village directly, but if you've heard of the place often called England's Most Haunted, you'll know exactly where I'm talking about. It was the kind of place people visit for Halloween ghost tours and newspaper specials, the kind of village that locals never really talk about unless they're warning you or testing you. My cousin and his wife had inherited this place from an uncle, a red-bricked, ivy-covered cottage at the edge of the village, backing right up to a patch of dense woodland. They were off to Spain for 2 weeks and asked if I was willing to look after the house and their dog, Alfie. It sounded like a perfect getaway from my cramped London flat. Quiet, fresh air, nature trails, maybe even work on a book I kept promising myself I'd write. They picked me up from the train station and drove me the last few miles in their old Defender. The road narrowed quickly after the turnoff, a single strip flanked by hedgerows and farmland, eventually giving way to thickets of forest. When we reached the village, it looked exactly like you would imagine. Postcard pretty, with a crumbling church, Tudor pubs and houses that had clearly been standing for centuries. But there was something off. I noticed it before we even reached the cottage. The locals, every person we passed on the lane, they didn't wave, they stared. Not angrily, not even suspiciously, just this quiet, unreadable stillness, like they knew something I didn't, or like they were waiting for something to happen. My cousin noticed me glancing and laughed it off. "Don't mind the locals," he said. "They're used to tourists and ghost hunters poking around. This place has a reputation, but most of it's nonsense." I nodded, didn't say anything, but something about that ride and the way we passed the crossroad with a hand-painted sign that simply read, "Turn back," stuck with me. Alfie was sweet, a sleepy retriever who barely left the rug by the fireplace. I spent the day settling in, unpacked, explored the house, and took a walk around the village. The people weren't rude, but they weren't exactly chatty either. I got a few polite nods and one old man who muttered something as I passed. I turned to ask him to repeat it, but he just kept walking. All I caught was the word woods and something about screaming. I remembered reading once that the woods here had a nickname, Deering Wood, but most called it something else, the Screaming Woods. That night, I cooked dinner, read by the fireplace, and went to bed around 11. The bed creaked in a way all furniture does, the kind of creak that doesn't feel quite mechanical, more like someone breathing slowly just beneath you. I chalked it up to the age of the house. At 3:17 AM, I woke up. Not from a noise, but from a lack of one. You ever wake up in such a deep silence that it feels unnatural, like the whole world has paused? I lay there for a moment, just staring at the ceiling, and then, faint but unmistakable, I heard it, knocking. 3 slow knocks. Not at the front door, not at the bedroom door, but from the window. The second floor window. I sat up, my heart kicking hard. There were no trees near the house tall enough to reach that window. I crept across the room and pulled back the curtains just a few inches. Nothing there. Just a sliver of moonlight and the top of the hedges. I must have stood there for a full minute, just watching. Then I heard it again, but this time from the back of the house, the kitchen. Another 3 knocks, not on the door, but on the glass, like fingernails tapping in a slow, patient rhythm. I didn't sleep much after that. By the 4th day, I was trying to brush it all off. Old house, country air. Maybe my mind was too used to the city's hum. I took Alfie for a walk around the village, keeping to the main paths. As we passed the churchyard, he stopped, completely froze, tail tucked, ears flat. Then he started growling, low, quiet, and constant. I followed his gaze, expecting a fox or maybe a stray cat. There was a woman standing at the far edge of the churchyard, just beyond the mossy gravestones. Pale, grey dress, long black hair, face partially turned away. She wasn't moving, just standing, like she's been placed there. I stared at her for a moment and then, no exaggeration, she was gone. I blinked, literally blinked, and she was just wasn't there anymore. I felt a jolt of static crawl down my spine. I tugged Alfie's leash and turned back. We went home, and I didn't leave that cottage for the rest of the day. The next night, just after midnight, I heard something else. Not knocking this time. Hoofbeats. I thought I was imagining it, but they were loud, crisp, like iron striking stone. Then I heard the wheels, wooden ones, creaking under weight, like an old wagon. I looked out the upstairs window. The lane in front of the cottage was empty, but I heard it. I heard the carriage pass right by the house. It was as if something invisible rolled down that lane, pulled by unseen horses. And I swear, just as I passed the gate, Alfie, who hadn't moved in hours, sat up and started growling at the door. Not barking, growling. Day 6, I was looking around the house. I didn't even know the cottage had a basement. I found the door behind a tall bookshelf that leaned slightly as if it didn't want to be moved. There was no reason for me to open it, but the door was open, just ajar, and from below, I swear I heard movement, like someone dragging something across the stone floor. I shut the door hard and shoved the bookcase back over it. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stayed by the fire with every light on in the house. And on the 7th day, I decided I've had enough. My cousin wasn't back for another 6 days, but I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed my things, loaded up the car, and got ready to leave. I walked Alfie one last time, and when I came back, the front door was open, and on the kitchen table was a sheet of yellowed paper. Looked like it had been torn from a ledger. The handwriting was cramped, jagged, and it simply said, "You weren't supposed to see her." There was no signature, no sign of forced entry, just that note. I left. I didn't care if it meant abandoning the house. I drove to the next town over and got a room above the pub. A month after returning to London, I started doing some digging. That woman in the churchyard, she matched multiple descriptions of local legends. The Red Lady, often seen near the graveyard. People say she's looking for her lost baby. Some say she was buried alive. The horse carriage? Same. Locals have reported hearing it for over 100 years, always at midnight, always unseen. And the Screaming Woods? I listened to an old interview from the 80s, a retired police officer describing cases of people going missing in that very stretch of trees. He said the screams were so regular at one point, the village just stopped reacting to them. But the part that froze me cold was a photograph I found in a local history book. A black and white image of the village celebration from the 1920s. People in suits and dresses, children with balloons, and right there, behind them all, half faded and out of place, was the same pale woman in a grey dress. Same long black hair, same posture, staring straight at the camera. I still have that photo saved, but I never look at it at night, and sometimes, only sometimes, I hear 3 knocks on the bedroom window, even though I live on the 5th floor now. They say there's a place in the Highlands where the fog never fully clears. A village that isn't on most maps, hidden deep beyond the pine stretches of Inverray, past Loch. Locals don't talk about it, even most satellite images blur at the edge, like the mist seeps into the data itself. I was travelling through Scotland in the fall of 2021, working on video series where I documented remote, abandoned places across Europe. Urban exploration with a folklore twist. My channel had just hit 200 subscribers and I wanted something special, something eerie. That's when I stumbled upon an old post in a forgotten forum thread, just 4 words, posted anonymously. Don't film in Kilgrave. There were no replies, no context, just that. I searched for Kilgrave on Google Maps. Nothing. I thought it was a hoax or some ARG marketing, but then I found it in a 19th century railway survey. Kilgrave, Argyll County. Population 47. Listed as abandoned, unsuitable terrain. No photos, no coordinates. But in the comments of an old YouTube video about Scotland's vanishing villages, someone casually mentioned that if you take the Glen Stray single track road and veer off into the forestry trail behind a closed gate, you'll eventually hit it, if the road hasn't changed again. So of course, I went. It was colder than I expected that morning. Fog hugged the hills like a blanket, thick and unmoving. I left my rental car near a locked forestry gate and hiked 2 hours with a GoPro and my drone gear in my pack. No cell signal, just me and the soft crunch of boots on old moss. The trail wasn't on any modern GPS, I'd copied it by hand from a printed audience map. Eventually, I reached it, Kilgrave. A row of 5 crumbling stone cottages, a small church blackened with time, a dried up well. The fog rolled in and out like breath, sometimes thick enough that I could barely see the stone steps in front of me. It didn't feel abandoned, it felt forgotten. The cottages still had intact chimneys, moss-covered doors hung slightly ajar, one even had lace curtains still dangling in the broken window like it was waiting for someone to come back. I started filming. The footage starts normal, scenic, quiet, my commentary light and observational. But when I played it back later, I swear to you, there was something wrong. In the first 30 seconds of the footage, as I panned the GoPro across the cottages, there's a figure standing in the window of the 3rd house. I didn't see it at the time. A long coat, face in shadow, hands pressed against the glass. But when I returned to the house just minutes later, the window was completely shattered, and the inside, empty, silent. I told myself it was the trick of the light, the fog, my imagination. That afternoon, I set up the drone for an aerial shot. I got some beautiful, eerie footage of the entire hamlet from above. Except, and this is what still gets me, every time I flew over and reviewed the footage, the number of cottages changed. One time it showed 6, another time 4, never the same layout twice. One clip even shows a narrow alley between the 3rd and 4th cottage. But when I walked it on foot, there was no alley, only a solid wall. I hadn't planned to stay overnight, but the sun went fast, behind the clouds by 3 PM, and pitch black by 5. I had a backup battery, some food, and a sleeping bag. I figured one night in a ruined village would make great content, clickbait gold. I chose the cottage with the least damage, roof mostly intact, fireplace crumbled but dry. At 2:13 AM, I woke up to footsteps. Not outside, inside the cottage. I froze in my sleeping bag. The steps were slow, deliberate, moving through the empty room behind me. The one with the collapsed floor. There was no way in from the back. I checked. The sound stopped, right next to my head. Then the softest sound I've ever heard. Click. My GoPro. I left it on the windowsill, turned off. Something had turned it on. At dawn, shaken but too stubborn to admit I was scared, I decided to explore the other buildings again before leaving. That's when I saw it. A cottage I hadn't noticed before, standing opposite the church, down a sloping path I could swear hadn't existed yesterday. It looked newer, windows intact, doors closed, roof thatched instead of tiled. I entered cautiously. Inside, it was identical to the one I slept in. Exactly identical. Same collapsed fireplace, same dusty shelf with an iron kettle, same corner where I dropped my bag. But my bag wasn't there. And in the corner where I'd slept last night, someone else's sleeping bag. Red. Old. Torn open at the side. I opened it. Inside was a Polaroid photo of me, standing in front of the church. Only, I never posed for a photo. I turned the photo over. In faded handwriting, it read, "Don't film in Kilgrave." By now, I was shaking. I grabbed my things, or what I thought were mine, and ran. The forest was on the way back. The trail forked more times than I remembered, and the fog, it never lifted, not even once. I made it back to the car just before sunset, collapsed into the seat, and drove until I hit a main road. I didn't upload the footage right away. Someone told me to review it in full first. When I finally did, 2 days later back in Edinburgh, I noticed something in every video clip. Every single frame where I'm holding the camera in selfie mode, my reflection is wrong. My mouth doesn't move when I talk. In one frame, I blink, but the reflection doesn't. And in the last clip, the one just before I left, I freeze frame and enhance it. There's a figure behind me, but not behind me in the real world, behind me in the reflection only, standing just inside the ruined church, wearing a long coat with the hands against the glass. I never posted the footage. I left it on a hard drive that I eventually smashed. But sometimes, when I shoot a new video, I swear I see things in the corner of my reflection, outlines, movements that don't match mine, and once, just once, I woke up to find a Polaroid on my windowsill. Same red sleeping bag, same ruined cottage, same fog. Only this time, the photo wasn't of me. It was someone else, holding a camera. I never intended to write about witches. I'm a historian by trade, university lecturer, mostly focused on 16th and 17th century social structures. My research has always leaned towards dry, data-driven content. But in 2020, when I received a grant to investigate local justice systems during the English witch trial period, my academic curiosity drew me to a name I haven't paid much attention to before: Pendle. The Pendle witch trials of 1612 were among the most infamous in British history. 12 accused, 10 hanged, mostly women from 2 poor families. There were whispers of curses, rivalries, and strange sightings on the hill ever since. I figured it would make a solid final chapter for my book. What I didn't expect was to leave that place changed, uncertain of my own memories and afraid to be alone at night ever again. I rented a cottage in Newchurch, a village tucked along the spine of Pendle Hill. It looked quaint, rolling farmland, a single pub, and a tiny church with a stone tower so old it leaned slightly in the wind. The cottage itself had been unoccupied for decades, but a preservation society had cleaned it up recently. The owner, a retired farmer named Mr. Clitheroe, handed me the keys with a dry warning. "If the wind comes from the hill," he said, "bolt your door and don't open it, no matter who knocks." He laughed after, like it was just a joke, but I noticed he didn't follow me past the stone gate. The first few days were calm. I documented court transcripts at the local archive, visiting Malkin Tower's remains, and even interviewed a folklore tour guide who claimed Pendle Hill was the closest thing we have to a living curse. But the nights, that was something else. There was a constant wind, always rising at dusk. It didn't sound like wind through the trees. It sounded vocal, not words exactly, but the cadence of speech, like someone speaking out of earshot. The third night, I found a dead hare nailed to my front door. Its body was stiff, mouth open, eyes gazed like glass. I left it there until morning, unsure what to do. When I opened the door again, it was gone. The cottage had an attic, narrow stairs leading to a low beamed space filled with dust and abandoned furniture. While digging for clues about the previous owners, I found a rolled parchment tucked inside a hollow floorboard. It was a map, hand-drawn, yellowed, and covered in strange symbols. It depicted Pendle Hill with paths not found on any modern map. Near the top was a symbol that looked like a circle of trees, marked the Hollow. Written in Old English script beneath it were the words, "Where they did gather, and where they do still." I asked around in the village, but no one acknowledged it. One man at the pub muttered something about the Dimdyke line and left before finishing his pint. I followed the map on the 5th day against my better judgment. It led me deep into the upper woodland of Pendle Hill, through thick fog that settled low like a living thing. And there it was, the Hollow. A circular clearing, completely silent. No wind, no birdsong. And at the centre stood a stone platform, about waist high, with a rusted iron ring embedded in the middle. Surrounding it were 12 scorched stumps, arranged in a perfect circle. I took photos, recorded notes, and left quickly. That night, someone knocked on my door. 3 knocks, then silence. I froze, remembered what Clitheroe said. I didn't move, not for hours. Over the next few days, things worsened. At night, I began to hear whispers from beneath the floorboards, phrases and dialects I couldn't understand. Old English, maybe. I recorded them and sent clips to a linguist friend at York. She responded one line only. That's 17th century Lancashire. They're saying, "Bring her to the seat." I stopped sleeping, stopped leaving the cottage. Every mirror in the house began to fog from the inside, even when it wasn't cold. On the 7th day, I found a symbol carved into my bedroom wall where I slept. It matched one from the map. On the 8th night, I saw her. I had cracked the window just an inch to let in some air. It was nearly 3 a.m. I was reading through trial testimony when I saw movement out by the field. A woman, wearing a long, tattered scrawl, walking slowly across the grass, barefoot, her feet not sinking into the wet soil. She stopped halfway to the hill, then looked up at my window. She smiled, then raised her hand, and every light in the cottage went out all at once. The fire, the lanterns, my laptop, pitch black. I shut the window and bolted it, and when I looked again, she was gone. I decided to leave the next morning. I didn't care about the grant or the research anymore, but my car was gone. Not broken down, but gone. I ran back to the pub, desperate for help. Mr. Clitheroe wasn't there, but a woman behind the bar said something I'll never forget. No one lived in that village since Margaret Fell went missing in 81. I told her I'd been staying there, that I met Mr. Clitheroe. The house was clean, furnished. She stared at me and whispered, "That house was never cleared. It's locked and condemned. The floor's still blood-stained." I left, ran, but I couldn't find the road back to the town. My legs brought me back to the Hollow. I don't remember how, I just ended up there. This time, the stone platform was clean. The ring glinted in the weak sunlight, and around me, I heard them. Whispers, chanting, laughter, screaming. But I was alone. I stepped into the centre of the ring. and I saw something scratched into the stone that hadn't been there before. The 13th returns. Then I heard my name, spoken in my mother's voice. I was found 2 days later, collapsed outside a Barley village hall. I couldn't speak, I couldn't write. I spent 3 months in psychiatric care. They said I suffered a breakdown, hallucinations brought on by isolation. But I know what I saw, what I heard, and what I brought back. Because sometimes, in my apartment in Leeds, I find symbols drawn in chalk on my floorboards. And once, I woke up to find 12 black stones arranged in a circle around my bed. The hollow is still there, they still gather, and I think they want me to gather others.